Владимир Путин, Владимир Путин, Владимир Путин, в русском рэпе Владимир Путин, ай, Владимир Путин, Владимир Путин, Владимир Путин, в русском рэпе Владимир Путин, ай.
Honestly, I don't expect Putin to lose this year's presidential election, especially how last year's parliamentary elections were held. Back in 2012, the presidential election had a lot of holes in it, and the people showed their anger, but nothing really changed. Corruption and bad living conditions are a thing in the country, and as I mentioned in a previous video, it is an example of a command and control economy. Gas is the only large industry, and the owners control the whole nation, while the average salary is around $400, and many social institutions are either non-existent or corrupt. Speaking of corruption, it is a very big problem in Russia, and it extends high up into the top parts of government. The kind we see today mostly started around Putin's second term and continued to be led by his nationalist party, United Russia. As the 1993 constitution put it, the president of Russia would have 4 years in office and will be limited to only 2 mandates. Yet in 2007, Dmitry Medvedev succeeded Putin as president, but the two had very strong ties. And November 2008, they sought to change the amendment for both the president and the parliament, which did come into force a month later. Now they will serve a 6-year term and be able to run for life. Kinda sounds like someone wants much more power. Anyway, because of widespread corruption taking place, with examples ranging from bribery, money laundering, tax evasion, unreported salaries, and so on, it's pretty clear to see how the country is being run. In the end, the Russian population is the one who pays the price, and many experts believe that the rapid increases in tariffs for housing, water, gas, and electricity, which significantly outpace the rate of inflation, are the result of corruption. However, the Russian government's actions don't go unnoticed, as several critics have pointed their finger. Alexei Navalny, a member of the opposition, recently held an investigation where he used all the results to make a documentary leaking sensitive information and exposing Dmitry Medvedev, who is currently the prime minister. Basically, the government has robbed Russia of about 70 billion rubles. Medvedev himself has brought several mansions, fields, and pools, which he doesn't really intend to share. I left a link to the documentaries in both English and Russian in the description below. However, what happened next is that the government ignored the whole thing. They didn't even comment. That's why between June 2017 and February 2018, hundreds of thousands of people participated in 90 cities in demonstrations, thousands of police attended, the military was even called in, and hundreds of people were arrested.
Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина! Путин вор! Путин вор!
It's also worth noting that there was not a single report in the Russian mass media about the demonstrations, and if you go on Google to research them, you will only find foreign sources. Yep, that is how censored the media is. Many journalists that oppose Putin have either disappeared or died under unknown circumstances. Constant arrests and legal complications serve to obstruct the means of an opposition necessary for a functioning democracy. In regards to this year's presidential election, I was hoping that Alexei Navalny, pretty naively, might actually be called into office. However, Russian courts suspended his campaign and he was barred from running as a result. Since then, Alexei has been trying to find some legal way to get back into the presidential elections, while he has also urged the citizens of Russia to boycott the elections themselves. Even the European High Court for Human Rights also called the treatment unfair and illegal. But it just shows that the opposition isn't something well known in Russia. An editorial for the New York Sun even claimed that, in theory, the regime permits opposition parties to exist. In practice, they are allowed no access to the press, no right to protest, and no redress in court. In Putin's state, opposition to the ruling United Russia is constructed as a subversion of the state. Now, I know that there are Russians who are more in line with the West, who really do want a different government in Russia. So here are just a few suggestions I might have for the next elections, and also something to do in the meantime. For the past few elections, opposition parties have repeated the same mistake. They have been running campaigns the same way as the current government and focused on walkabouts, public speeches, and gatherings, and certain campaign rallies. None of them have worked. United Russia has much more resources, much more manpower, and an entire organization of grassroots leaders. You cannot win against these guys conventionally. And in response to the latest events all over Russia, you must not even consider engaging in civil disobedience and demonstrations as to create change, because they are hard to carry out, they're destructive, and they're illegal. Whenever Boris Nemtsov or Navalny organized protests, it just allowed the government to arrest them and ignite fear amongst the public, resulting in the exact opposite outcome of what they expected. Look at what happened to an opposition leader, Vyacheslav Maltsev, after he constantly started commenting about starting a revolution.
Сейчас я из дома вещаю. Тут, я так понимаю, вскрывают квартиру. Так что я сейчас всех ставлю в известность, что тут вот налет такой на меня. Отключили они мне интернет, но я смог войти все-таки.
Instead of only perpetuating the problem, all efforts and resources should be directed to the best chance there is for change in Russia, and that is the internet. The internet is one of the most dominating platforms of the modern world, being used by everyone, especially by the young generation. As the Latin phrase goes, "Sienta potentia es," you can raise awareness and build more support for the opposition. It is also free, you don't need a budget, it is the less censored, and it is legal. Well, yeah, even in Russia, people do have the internet. All efforts must be directed to promoting and creating pro-opposition content online. One example includes the creation as well as following news media sites. The more views they have, the more likely they are to appear in search engines all over the Russian web, and it will become more accessible to people. The more people see this media, the more information will be spread. Another option that is more popular, especially among the younger population as well, is to write commentaries on social medias or websites. I understand that VK is the most popular one. Or you can even write blogs, or the most popular way, videos. The options for topics are endless. You can talk about the worst politics about United Russia, worst MPs, anti-Putin criticism, Western values in Russia, life in Russia, bad living standards, rising cost, reviews of anti-Putin books, anti-government short films, parodies of the Russian national anthem, explaining certain issues in depth, criticism of certain government achievements that are questionable. There are so many topics that can be talked about, and yet so few YouTubers in Russia have done it. The Kremlin has its own army of Russian trolls who make accounts online and openly take part in internet debates as well as spread their own agenda. They glorify United Russia and give off the sense that their country is the best in the world while demonize the West and portraying us as weak, unintelligent bastards. They portray Russia as a victim of Western bullies and do their utmost best to excuse military aggressions of the Soviet Union and Russian Federation. Pro-Western Russians can easily make their own channels and commentaries to counteract that effort. You can make video responses, roast videos, debates, unified collaborations, and so on to make an anti-troll kind of like army. It's obvious that this kind of government doesn't do a lot of constructive work, and so when people will realize that they have more surveillance, less professional opportunities, more corruption, then maybe they'll be so unhappy that they'll be in favor of the opposition during the next election. What's great is that this actually can work. United Russia's popularity declined from 64% in 2007 to 54% in 2016. If more Russians were critical of the party and showed everyone that change can come from another party, then you could finally see a pro-Western government come to power.
Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина! Путин вор! Путин вор!
Russia was once a Western nation. Peter the Great was on tours all across Europe and took a very strong interest in Western Europe. He implemented many Western reforms and practices. Catherine the Great continued on this tradition. She enjoyed democracy on paper and acted as a mediator for many wars in Europe. Imperial Russia in general was an ally of the West until the Bolsheviks took power after the Russian Revolution. Alexei Navalny wants this kind of Russia. He stated that he considers Russia to be a part of the Western world and rejects any Eurasianist ideology that United Russia currently supports. This is the man that should be in the Kremlin. The only thing standing in in the way of the establishment is that it still has the Soviet system. Just note that you don't fight fire with fire, you fight fire with water.
Требования. Не выдвигайтесь на выборы 2018 года. Это Путину. Вы за 17 лет завели страну в тупик, превратили Россию в империю зла, установили диктатуру. Если вы уйдете сейчас, у России появится шанс не стать страной-изгоей. России нужна демократия.
Путин – это война. Без войны он не удержится у власти. Путин – это воровство сплошное, это коррупция. Я написал в письме: хватит, Путин, врать, воровать, воевать.